from there we can move on to what we want to talk about for the movie. So from there, let's talk about, I really wanted to get into, I don't want to get too much into the movie, so we'll just back a little bit into it, and we'll talk first about the demonstration signs. Should we go there first? We'll ask first. Here we go. It's a lie. I need to tell my own technical difficulties. Okay, so the movie Unfix, without spoiling anything for anybody, because we're all going to see it today at 4:45. Why don't you guys, we can go through and talk about what the movie means for you and what's important about it for you guys.
You want to start?
I always spoil it, though. I always end up spoiling.
You're on thin ice, pal.
Okay. What was the question again?
Okay, without spoiling the movie,
Yes.
do you want to just talk about overall what the movie is about and, kind of what
Yeah,
it means
well,
for you?
I think it's different for each of us. I'll be curious to hear from them as well, but I think overall it is obviously we're talking about conversion therapy, and I think as far as a timeline, this is dealing with the after effects. I think there's a lot of projects that look at the time during conversion therapy, what that therapy actually looks like, and this is looking at the aftermath, the years, decades later, how the effects of that time are still controlling people that had to go through it. So I think that's the conversion therapy side of it, but it's also just, we've also stressed, and Graham stressed, that it's just a human story, that it's about people connecting with each other and with themselves and learning to be okay and accept who they are.
Love that.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, I'd say it's a story about healing and self-acceptance and, coming out on the other side. But, I'll keep it simple. I don't want to spoil anything. But it is the story of someone's healing and then how everybody else plays and their roles within this person's journey.
Right. The interconnectedness of how one person's experience with conversion therapy can kind of seep into their lives and affect all of their relationships throughout, personal, romantic, friendships, and what that looks like for the people within their life as well.
I think at its core, Unfix is a movie about learning to love yourself for your true identity, for who you really are, who you were put on this earth, and that soul purpose, and really coming to terms with how conversion therapy has really destroyed that recognition. That's what I would say.
Yeah, everything they just said. It's a great movie, and it really shows just the dangers of conversion therapy and how it can affect somebody. As people will see in the film, right? Just a specific person has gone through it, and we see how that has affected them through their whole life, and now we're seeing the after effects in the film.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't seen the film yet, but what I found out about it that really excites me is the fact that the main character isn't this traumatized queer person. Because so much of queer film is like, oh, I'm so sorry you're queer. And the fact that it's like a straight person who's harmed by conversion therapy really just allows us to tell our story without having to sit in our trauma and be triggered while we're watching someone else heal through our own story. So I thought that was very sensitive, and I just really appreciate that.
Yeah, I was really, I loved this film, and it was on a lark that I saw it, and I've read a lot of conversion stories and seen movies, but this one I love so much because it shows how it doesn't just destroy the person who goes through it, but it destroys the family and the people on the outskirts. And my conversion therapy destroyed my children's lives and took that relationship away from me and from them. And they are even more of a victim than I was. And so I was just geared in. That was the message that was being sent. And I appreciated that so much.
These are great. I loved hearing all of this because you guys didn't give anything away, which is wonderful. But also the different perspectives too, because you guys are so ingrained in it, and then to hear this fresher and new ideas, I really, really, really like it. So, Wonderful. All right, well, I'm going to go back over to this side. You guys ready? All right. All right, so we're going to go through, like, how did you guys get involved in the film? I mean, it's so exciting. Tell us the story of how it all happened.
Sorry. There's a platform you self-submit yourself, Actors Access, and I ended up so I found the film on there, and I remember like looking at the immediate like listing, and it just was like, oh my god, that sounds like something so interesting. I want to apply, and I got the audition, and I didn't like the sides of the product. I don't know how you guys felt. We had no idea that was about conversion therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea, like when I first auditioned for it, and honestly, I didn't have any idea what conversion therapy was. I had no idea, completely blind, like going in. So I had to do a lot of research just for the audition process. That's kind of like how I got involved. Graham, we talked a lot, like through the callbacks. Like he really wanted to like educate whoever was auditioning, everything that you had to basically like know about Ari and the story. Not so much the story, but like kind of about like Ari's inner world and what he was going through. That's how I got involved.
Yeah, I think we all had like the same.
The similar
same
things.
experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The self-submissions.
Self-submission and not knowing what it was truly about, getting in, got to work together, audition together, and then they like paired different people together, and we were able to get this.
Yeah.
Whole group of
Quite
people.
a family, and you guys have a really good energy together, so it's really amazing that it all came together in this space.
We actually spent a lot of time together.
It was during
Yeah.
Corona
offset.
times, right?
Yeah.
So you guys
Yeah.
were all huddled together.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
I would love to ask you guys, one of you guys, a question on this side of the table. I'm curious to know what was the process like to break out of conversion therapy, and what did that look like for you?
You guys want to take it?
Oh god.
That's a
So the thing is that, honestly, what got me out of it is I got hugged by a gay guy. I had done all these things where I was like wearing plaid and I was like so manly, right? And my friend was like, "Oh, I need to meet this guy. We've been pen pals or whatnot. So, but your conversion therapy is going fine." I was like, "Oh yeah." And then she showed me a picture and I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh shoot, is that why people do that?" And that was like, "No, I bet I'm still fine." And then it was very nonchalant, just meeting this gay guy, and he hugged me as we left because it was this very cordial thing. And because I had been so focused on conversion therapy and killing everything inside myself, it was like this first time I could breathe in my whole life. And it was just some stranger who like hugged me, but knowing that he was also queer, like, was a hint of like, do you realize you can actually have authentic love where you're not lying, where you're not like hating yourself, second guessing everything. It felt like for the first time in my life I didn't have to pretend what love to look like. I knew what it looked like. So that was like, no, if it's not working and this is the opposite, it's not gonna work.
Well, for me, so with my conversion therapy, I was forced into it by my parents, and I got out of it because we just stopped going to the guy. It was very expensive. He was charging like $120 an hour, and we were there for 2 hours every week. And that gets pretty expensive for parents with 2 children, especially when you're driving 2 hours to get there. So we stopped doing that, but then also, my parents saw that I wasn't improving, and my mental health was getting much worse. Improving. I should preface by saying that they fully understand the implications of what happened then, and are very aware of everything, very supportive now. But that's why we stopped going. It got very expensive. I wasn't improving, and I wasn't things weren't going the way they wanted, and they were very concerned about me and my mental health, and then them too, because not only was I going in and having this guy trying to convert me, he was also mentally abusing my parents by pinning it all on them and telling them, oh, well, it's your fault, and so they would go in and they would come out feeling like crap every time. So they wanted to stop going as well. So that's how I got out of it. It wasn't really up to me. It just happened that thankfully I stopped going. Yeah.
Well, it didn't work. I mean, simply that's. I mean, I did it for off and on for almost 30 years. At different periods of my life, and I mean, I did the ultimate conversion therapy by getting married to a woman and thinking that, well, I'll do it, which it did not. But I also did all the tricks in the books that I'm sure you guys have read, and all the programs, and I mean, I even did stuff that a therapist had me do outside the books. She had me sniff dog shit while looking at pictures of men for a couple months. So I would take pictures out of men's magazine, like cologne ads, and look at the pictures, and you sniffed it until you threw up. And so I did that for a couple months. That was weird. I didn't even realize at the time that it was weird. I thought it was perfectly normal. So I think it was realizing it's not working, and I just I still got 30 years of my life left to live, and it's not working. And I think that, and maybe this is for you guys too, it was the death of hope that was worse than anything else, worse than coming out, worse than anything is going. I had lived on this idea that it will work, eventually will work, and when I realized it's not, that was more depressing than anything else. It wasn't until I finally accepted who I was that all went away.
That tangibility, that idea that it could have been fixed, was what was keeping you.
That's what got me up
through
every
the
day.
dog
Don't
shit,
worry,
literally.
it'll work. It'll work.
Well, I'm curious now because I know it's sensitive, but just to understand like the magnitude of what y'all have been through. What were some of the hardest days? And you don't have to get into too much detail if you're not comfortable. But what were the worst days for you going through that process? What did that look like? Some of the worst days in conversion therapy, the things they did and put you through.
Yeah. Well, for me, I always say that my conversion therapy, because it was very clinical. Like I would go in, and this was an actual still is, a licensed therapist in the state of Kentucky, and so it was very clinical, and he did have actual like therapeutic practices mixed in, which were healthy, like eating healthy, getting exercise, stuff like that.
Good trick.
Yeah. Start with that. Yeah. But the worst part was when I would go home, and my parents would have all of this like trauma that they're going through from talking to him, and then they would come home and we would basically just take it out on each other, right? And they would be all worked up because he's telling them that it's not working because I'm not trying hard enough, and they need to make sure that I'm trying hard enough. And some of the worst times were screaming matches that we would get into with each other after we would be done at therapy, or in the car, stuff like that. So it really wasn't being in the therapy itself. It was everything that happened afterwards that was terrible.
So there's this term in psychology called psychosomatic, and it's basically where your psychological problems become so intense that your body ends up manifesting pain. And the longer I was in conversion therapy, the more I got a very specific headache. So I know I'm doing good when I can talk about conversion therapy and the headache is not there. But hearing this question, I did actually have that headache. So I thought about it. No, it's okay. It's not the first time I heard it. For me, what it was is that the harder I tried, the worse it got, because I saw how far I had, because it was like a carrot and a stick. And I ended up having split personalities where someone would say, are you the straight Sam or the gay Sam? I don't know who I'm talking to right now. So for me, having dissociative identity disorder, legitimately becoming crazy, was probably the worst of it, and it took years to become sane. So that was really the worst of it for me.
Besides The dog shit. I didn't particularly care for looking into a mirror and getting myself worked up into an agitated state where I would cry. That was what the book told me to do, and then make fun of myself for crying because I'm struggling with something that's not such a big deal. I did that for a while too. That was bad. I mean, there were a lot of weird things. I mean, playing basketball with other gay men so that we could try to get more butch, like wearing plaid.
There you go.
You ever seen 8 gay men play basketball together? It was working the opposite. No shirts and skins for you guys. Those kind of weird things. But absolutely, I think what you said is it was actually coming out for me, which was awful. Because of kids, telling my children why I had to leave was the worst moment of my life that I can't even spend too much time talking about it because I get into a state. Because their lives, like I said, they were ruined. And the conversion therapy to this day has hurt them badly. And so that was probably the hardest part, was not accepting it until, if I had accepted it earlier on in life, no, I wouldn't have had my kids. But having accepted it later on in my life, it hurt these same children. So there's nothing that I went through for 25, 30 years through conversion therapy that was worse than having to lose 3 children that I still love very, very much. And I still reach out to this day, but I don't hear back. So, that's, I think for me, that was the worst.
Thank you for sharing all of
you.
that.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah, that's
how vulnerable that is, so thank you.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel, like, just now that we've just been hit with, like, their real life, and how do you feel like connecting to that as actors, like knowing what you've been through in the movie?
I was just gonna say, I mean, when you're talking about isolation too, that's something, I mean, like with Ari, that I really, really, really felt, being completely alone, are only having this one right here, and yeah, I can't give away anything. But
Spoiling it, Zane.
but when there's that one person that you hinge everything on, it becomes very, very difficult to if I'm not going to come up with something.
You're trying so hard.
I won't say anything, but I understand the stakes of that situation 100%.
And to be fair, it's not just about conversion therapy. There was so much in that movie too. There was like, oh, it went that direction. I had no idea. Then it went a different direction. I'm like, boy, there's everything in this movie. There's just a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
It's just so creative in that sense. I always told Graham, the scene where you guys are jogging and the car is following behind, I thought that was masterful.
Yeah.
Because it made me so nervous. I'm like, get out of the way, get out of the way. And it just wretched up the suspense.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Ratcheted.
Ratchet.
Pretty sure that was an actual car.
Yeah.
It's not actually on the
Was
street.
that It's like, what are these people doing?
It just kept going.
But I was just glued in the whole time, and it wasn't just about the conversion therapy stuff.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, because we've talked about a little bit about it, and we've talked about a few ideas of how it's a little bit different than other notes of conversion therapy. We've talked about how it's not the story of the queer person facing. I just wanted to know, for you guys, how do you feel this movie is set across differently from other conversion therapy stories? I mean, we've talked a little bit, but if you have any other thoughts.
Well, I think building off of what he just said, that it is sort of matched with legitimate forms of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's characters that are talking about their journey through legitimate forms of therapy that are actually beneficial to people's mental health. And so to have that comparison and to see that actually having an effect on somebody who has that trauma and who's never been able to deal with it, I think is what makes this film stand out.
I totally agree. I think that's one of the most important parts of the film too, because it allows, without giving away, it allows for therapy, it allows for religion and God and however you need to guide your life in your own way, and you can figure it out. But I think that's really interesting. What about you guys? Any other?
I mean, this one deals with the aftermath of conversion therapy, and I feel like from what I've seen, some other conversion therapy based movies are thematically it's kind of the process of it happening and what it's like to be in that. So this one deals with the scars that it leaves.
Yeah.
I agree. I hate to say, like, yes, I agree with all the things.
What they said.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah.
just, there's just so many obstacles that these characters face that it goes beyond that. Conversion therapy is central to it, but there are so many other things.
Yeah, it's not modeling either, like you had said, or I think you had said, it's not like, oh, this is another depressing game,
Right.
you know. There was so much more to it than that. There was even some funny parts that I really appreciated too, just as a storyteller. There was so much story there. There was just so much story packed into one film. And most of the conversion therapy stuff is seeing the sad abuse, the end. And it's over.
Right.
This was different. This was very, very creative.
Yeah.
Well, so not being survivors yourselves, how did you prepare for your roles, and like what research did you do? Specifically you, Zane?
Yeah.
What did you do, and what did anyone else do around it?
Oh my God, so much research. Just preparing for like the audition, like I was saying, I did a lot of because I was trying to connect to it somehow. I was trying to like find a way in because I first of all I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was, and so I went through a bunch of YouTube wormholes. I read Boy Erased. I read some other books. Body Keeps a Score was one of the best books that I read. Just understanding how you hold trauma from your childhood in your body, and understanding like how it like subconsciously reacts to certain like situations. Because I think that's something that Ari was constantly experiencing throughout the film, and trying to uncover that and figure that out. And then like for me, the way that I sort of connected to Ari was as a kid. I mean, honestly, like I think trying to figure out where did Ari's life go and where did my life go, like starting out as a kid, and how it could have been the same, and connecting to that purity of like who he was and like trying to like get back to. Yeah. So I can.
No, we appreciate you sharing this. It's really intense, so it's okay.
I like, in a similar fashion, I mean, obviously my character is not the one who's going through it, but is deeply attached to and in a lifetime partnership with someone who has, and who feels guilty for how he landed there. So for me, I did a lot of research surrounding. I knew conversion therapy was a thing. I hate to say a thing, but a tool that people try to use. But I didn't know the magnitude of it and the severity of the fact that it's still around and how heavily it is used still. So I did a lot of research around that, just so I knew some things. But then I just really relied on my empathy that I have for other humans, and because Ava is so, she's just willing and will not leave his side. Like she said, I will be here till my last breath for you. However you need me to, you just have to be like open and available for me, and honest. And even through, I mean, any spoilers, you know, we all have our own set of secrets, if you will, and it's, for me, it was like, how do I justify asking someone to be honest with me and not being fully honest with them?
Yeah.
And what does that look like for me?
Okay.
whether it's for a good reason, a bad reason, we make up our own reasons to justify why we think that is. But that's kind of the pillars that I stood Ava on to get there.
Well, for me, I can't really dive into it too much because it would kind of spoil some of the plot, I guess, from my characters coming from and the research that I had to do individually. But I do kind of play a part where I'm helping Zane's character Ari. But maybe we can talk about it after the film. what the kind of research I had to do for that. But when it came down to conversion therapy, I think it was more during the process and after we finished filming that I looked more into it, and I was curious about, where these people, where they coming from, and how that really, you see what Zane does, and it really shines a light on how bad it gets, and how badly it affects people. So I think I really started, I kind of got interested in it after and started doing more research on my own, just aside from the film, personally, yeah. But leading up to the film, my research was much more focused on, I can't even spoil it.
Just did some research.
I did the research.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of reading.
A lot of reading.
Yes, books and things.
I'm talking to professionals, so I did get
That's great.
Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, well, for me, I think I'm kind of unique in that my character is someone who's very skeptical of any form of therapy or assisted or just assistance with one's mental health. John grew up in the foster care system in New York, so that's where a lot of my research went into. And what's ironic about that is that is the root of his skepticism, when there actually are some interesting similarities between growing up in big city foster care systems and something like conversion therapy, because there is stress on isolation and on neglect and on basically disconnecting you from other people so that it's easier to, have you fit into whatever need that whatever foster care system has to fill. So interesting that something actually quite similar to conversion therapy led to skepticism in this individual to really any form of that. So really, I think leading up to the project, it wasn't as essential for me to see that other side of it in order to, I guess, maintain that skepticism. But like Noah said, sort of through the process and following to get to learn more about it, and that way was very impactful. And also something that I didn't know about. I grew up in Arkansas, so I'm in the South, the Bible Belt. So it certainly was something that was present, and I had fortunately, grown up in a theater community and around people who were comfortable with themselves and were supported in being themselves, but it certainly was next door, the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I have to say about that. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I'd like to just really step in here just really quickly and just talk about some of the things that I do. So I'm just a volunteer crisis counselor for Trevor Project, and what we do is we spend whatever time we're able to talking on the phone or text messaging or on the computer with kids age 12 to 24 who are in crisis, and oftentimes we run into folks who have either been through conversion therapy, but what I have confronted personally, and this is my own personal experience, is there's so many kids who have the threat of, they call it the camps, are going to be sent away, and that's what's looming over them, and so they're constantly thinking about how I can change, what can I do, how can I hide myself until I don't have to go to camp. And so that really, and that's, for Trevor Project, that's when we market, and that's where we accumulate all of our data that we're able to use for advocacy later on. And that is the most upsetting thing for me, because coming from a privileged background, and camp was not that to me at all. So to hear that camp is the most frightening thing for these young children to hear, that really woke something up in me. So these kids have a space to go to with Trevor Project. There's also many other resources for them and places that they can talk to, and crisis lines. But I just wanted to bring that little perspective. As a young child, I can't imagine like that cloud that might have been over you in that way, and I just really want to commend you for that. That's really intense.
Thank you for the work you do. When I left conversion therapy, my family said that I was dead to them. And when I was at my lowest point, I did call the Trevor Project. And I've been an advocate for it ever since, because I was at a very low place. I had no one in my life, and y'all pulled me through it.
Oh
so
my
thank
gosh, that is amazing. Thank you. No, thank you for telling me that. That's
I
amazing.
teach high school, and so I've referred several kids to the Trevor Project. I've even gone on there myself just to look at various things. I wish there was something like the Trevor Project for people like me,
I know.
who came out later in life,
Yeah.
and it is traumatic to lose your family.
Yes.
And we've heard so many stories about kids who've lost their family. But I couldn't find any resources for me who lost my kids. I looked, I'm like, there's got to be other parents
Right.
who this has gone through, and I couldn't find anyone. And it would,
Yeah,
it would
I
have
hear
been
you.
good if we had something like that.
I hear you. There's a
as
space
well.
for that, for
Because
sure.
there are people,
Yeah.
now that it's becoming more and more accepted, people are coming out later in life.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason why I came out, is I realized, hey, I'm in Southern California. This is
We're
not
gonna
going to
allow
go
it.
that
We're
bad.
gonna allow the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I knew I would lose my evangelical friends, and I did. But I still think still so many other people in my life that, were supportive. Yeah. So I love the Trevor Project, and I contribute to them quite often, and I hope it continues to grow.
Me as well. I spend a lot of time just on those. I do a lot of the text. That's who I am, because I get nervous when I talk too much and I get a little worked up. So I find that if I can type, I can be much calmer. I can work on my emotions, and I've worked with them for almost 4 years now, and it's been really an amazing experience. And I appreciate the money donations, but also just the talking about it, the creating as much awareness just for the open space for conversations for adults as well as kids is going to be really beneficial. I think we can make a good change, at least in your community.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on something about the threat of conversion
Yeah.
therapy. That's something I hear about a lot. Because at the Conversion Therapy Dropout Network, we deal with primarily survivors, people that have been through conversion therapy, but we also have a lot of people that are either in like a gray zone or they've had that. One of our board members is not a survivor, but had that growing up, was the threat, the knowing that conversion therapy existed, or not necessarily that that's what it was called, but knowing that there was something like that there, and that being LGBTQ+ was not acceptable.
Yeah.
And so we kind of call that conversion therapy adjacent in a way.
Interesting.
Because it also, it does cause a lot of the same trauma that conversion therapy survivors feel. And Sam and I were talking about this yesterday in the car, actually. That's something that we are looking to kind of incorporate more of, because those people also need their own support, because they also have, the family rejection fears, and sometimes they do have the family rejection. And it's more, as we go more into it, and as we learn more about conversion therapy and hear people's stories, we learn that the experience of a conversion therapy survivor and those around them is very much a spectrum, like the community, where it's, there's some gray areas where you kind of feel like you went through a form of conversion therapy, or you kind of got it from your parents, and it's really not a hard definition.
Yeah.
And we're really trying to bring more awareness to that, and really nail down how we can best support the people that didn't go to a formal conversion therapy place or a formal, practice, but also supporting people that did. So that's definitely something that's coming up more often. Now that it's being talked about more.
Just like the language itself, like whether it's a camp or whether I was just sent away for therapy, or whether that's how they're getting away with having banned conversion therapy, but it's not really banned, because they're getting away with it by talking about it as other.
By naming it something
Exactly.
else.
So
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
And I like that your film talks a lot about the family impact, because a lot of times the stories that I hear in our weekly meetings with conversion therapy survivors is less what happened to us in conversion therapy and more on the impacts to our families, the isolation, the loneliness. And it seems like your film covers all of that. and it actually focuses on what's really impacting the survivors, and it's the after effects.
Yes.
Because if we survive, okay, we survived.
Yeah.
Now, how do we rebuild our lives? And so I'm wondering, like, have you learned anything from your characters that maybe personally benefited you?
I know I did. Working on my character is really my character wants to be in the mental health world professionally, and they also, again, can't spoil anything, but my character does work a lot on breath and relaxation. And I found when I was working on this and I was doing my own personal research for Max, I actually did feel a difference within myself when I started practicing the methods of relaxation that I was teaching in the film, which I hadn't known before. So that was, I kind of had an aha moment. I was like, wow, this acting thing is pretty strong. So that was very impactful, and like to this day, I still use a lot of the things that I learned from this film in particular.
Those breathing tools are everything. I use them literally all the time with all those kids on the phone all the time. And when I saw it in the film, my heart stopped because I was like literally going through the same conversations that I'm having. So it's really amazing.
Yeah, no, lovely stuff. Yeah, I think everybody should know how to do that.
Yeah.
Have you teach anyway?
Well, yeah, I think that was kind of another big thing too that I got, was just like learning that separation of like what actual practices are beneficial, and everybody's different, so things affect people differently, and things can be used, I guess, sort of as tricks, like Curtis was saying about the beginning of his conversion therapy being like exercising and having a healthier diet, and like those are legitimate, have legitimate positive effects on one's mental health, and so it can get snuck into more venomous areas so I think the point being the importance of identifying which things actually do have a benefit on someone's mental health and their growth, and how those don't have to be connected to the other stuff that we've been talking about. Yeah.
Surprisingly, those things didn't help. They didn't make it better.
Yeah, interesting.
Crazy.
Didn't take.
No.
I think, other than the sheer resilience that Ari, the quality that he has as a character, another one of those things I did was run a lot. The character, he's a long distance runner, and that's how he kind of like copes with his anxiety. So I got so into running that it's ironic, because today's the LA Marathon day, that I ended up doing a marathon in Greece.
Wow.
So I mean, so I learned that from him.
I learned that. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, it's
A way to
it's
handle
also
your-
a way to like handle anxiety, but also to push through that barrier. Like they say, like marathon, there's that wall. Like you hit the wall, and you have to like push through. Yeah, that's one of the hardest things that I've ever done. So that's one thing I definitely picked up.
I mean, I've learned a lot from Ava, of how selfless and giving and empathetic and loving she is, and how to be more forgiving to myself. Because she is a character where, you watch her go from beginning to end, and you're like, at the end, you're like, is she gonna be okay?
Yeah, totally.
She is, but I still think that there's a lot to learn from those strings that weren't tied in a pretty bow at the end. But I have learned a lot from her to how to be more forgiving to ourselves, and maybe what we've done in the past to affect another person in a possibly negative way, and what that looks like 10, 20 years down the line, and how we maneuver through where we are in the present to have some forgiveness and self-love there. And I've gained and learned and loved these guys.
Yeah. Also, secrets. Don't keep secrets.
Yes, yes.
Don't you
Don't
keep those
keep secrets.
Until after the film.
right. You can keep them now.
Technically, yeah.
All right. Well, do you guys have any other further questions for?
I actually did have a question
Yes.
for you guys. I was watching some documentaries on conversion therapy and survivors and stuff, and so what I'm gathering was because what I didn't know before is that there are people who have gone to conversion therapy willingly as adults because is that what you did, or because I know that you did it when you were a kid and that was not your decision,
Right.
But for you guys, what led you to making that choice in the first place?
I mean, so for me, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was my entire world.
Okay.
And like they gave me a family, they gave me a father figure when I had none. And so if you truly believe what you're being taught, if they tell you to jump, you say how high and what do I say while I'm there? And the fact that they said, you have to go to conversion therapy, like my whole religious community and my family gave me no other option as long as I wanted to stay in my religious community. So I always get surprised when I talk with queer people who are ex-Mormon and didn't go to conversion therapy, because then I wondered, well, then did you not believe, or did you just have this innate self-knowledge of like, no, why would I torture myself? No, that's obviously not right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm almost surprised when people don't go through it, because the whole religion manipulates you to think there is no other option.
Yeah.
So just the idea that people don't go through it, I'm still shocked by.
Yeah, look, people can say you made the decision to go. Yes, but no. When you're told, but if you don't, I think I started it when I was around 19 or 20. If you don't, you'll lose your family, your friends.
You don't have a
You'll
choice.
go to hell. I mean, that was the number one shocker.
Yeah.
So you didn't really have a choice. You did, but you didn't. So yeah, I voluntarily put myself through it for the whole time. My parents were supportive of it. They liked the idea that I was going through it. But I knew deep down that if I went down that road, my whole life, as I had known it up till that point, which I thought was the only life you could have, would be gone. And I didn't have the maturity yet to understand that no, you'll live, and you can have a very productive and happy life. And I don't want to end my thing either on it's so sad because it's so tragic, because I was able to find love, and I was able to meet a man and get married and have what is the most normal life for me, which is so abnormal before. Was it worth, people will say, was it worth going through it and losing your kids? Well, I don't know if I would have stayed, I don't know if I'd have been here. I really don't. I had been in 2 mental institutions by that point. I don't think I would have been here. So the best thing I could have done for my kids is got healthy and accept who I was. And it was phony to be telling my children to live a fake life. And so even if I went back today and took on that lifestyle again, right, it would not be authentic, it would be fake. And I would be telling my kids, it's okay, you've got to be fake in order to make everybody else happy. And so to put a nice big bow on it, I miss my kids terribly, but I absolutely love that I finally get to, at 52, I get to finally just be a normal person, because I never, ever, ever had a period of my life that was peaceful, ever. And finally I got to have some peace, and when they say it gets better, it does get better.
Yes.
It's just sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
When did that when was the aha moment where you found that peace? Was there like a specific moment in your life where you just felt the weight kind of come off?
Yeah, it was about 6 months ago.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was still very, very torn. Even though I was married by then and I loved my husband, but I was still very torn that I was doing something wrong, and that I was horrible to my children and what I did to them. That whole guilt thing. And I don't know, I can't even tell you what it was. It was just like a weight had been lifted over a couple weeks, and I went, oh my gosh, now and accepted it and loved it, and I wouldn't change. I might change the way I kind of handled things, the first year, but it was a really big case of arrested development, and I had stopped being. I didn't get to really be a teenager. So when I came out at 47, I was like a teenager, just finally experiencing what real life was like, and I know I made a lot of dumb mistakes. Some of
Most
the changed
teenagers
those.
do. So.
Even more, crazy stuff. So.
So can I ask that? So that was like about a month or so before you saw Unfix, because we met you
It was
in
even
October.
after.
Oh
It was
my-
just this October?
Yes.
Okay, it was about around that
Wow,
time.
so we saw
I
you in the
think that's
first-
when I started to get comfortable in my skin.
Good for you.
I had to admit, I did. That was right around when I walked away from the church, because I was
Yeah.
still involved in church up till 4 or 5 months ago, and I loved these people at this church, and who were very accepting.
Yeah.
But there was so much trauma done to me by the evangelical community over so many years that I told them, even though you guys aren't like that, it's too traumatic for me to keep coming. Week after week, I would leave depressed, and like you get a headache, I would leave just really depressed after leaving church. And I said, they've done too much to me, I have to walk away. And they were also very helpful in keeping my kids from me. So I had to walk away. So I think that process, running into you guys, that helped going into the Unfix thing. You can tell I'm a super fan. It just
We're a
all
fan
of that kind of was around the same time. And God love him. My husband hung on and just waited, and very patiently waiting for me to kind of grow and get into the spot I'm in now. And I'm glad I could make him happy, because he deserves that too.
Yeah. But you deserve it too. Like, I mean, we've talked so much, and we keep going back to making sure everybody else is happy, but at the end, they're not going to be happy if you're torturing theirs.
Yeah, you're right.
I definitely have a plug for our group, because for me, I mean, my conversion therapy was 20 years ago, and I would say I didn't start healing until I started seeing other survivors and sharing our stories. Because I went to school to become a therapist, thinking all of that was behind me. I was fine. I knew all of these psychology terms. I'm okay, right? And then I actually start seeing clients and all these tiny little things that are innocuous for other therapists. Suddenly, I'm back in conversion therapy, even though it was 20 years ago. And so I couldn't even finish my degree. But then I see this group of people, and anything that we share, every head is nodding. Like, I know exactly how that feels. And it just lets you let go of, like, well, maybe I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not too sensitive.
No.
Maybe it really is just how we were treated in this society that's the problem, which is why I'm so glad that you're getting this out. Because, I mean, whether it's trauma of being abused or being adopted, there's so many traumas out there.
Yeah.
And if you don't have space to talk about it,
Absolutely.
there's only so much healing that you can reach until you have someone mirror with you, like, I've been through that, and you're fine.
Yeah.
And then you can just be like, okay, I am fine.
Yeah.
And then you can,
You
like,
are.
laugh at your own trauma, because you're like, that was ridiculous. I thought plaid would make me straight. Oh my God.
I thought a Jeep would make me straight.
Hey!
Baseball. I got the Jeep, and I got the big tires, I got tattoos.
Oh, country music.
No, I wouldn't. As long as we're plugging things. I did write a book about my experience. Who hasn't?
Good. Yes.
Um,
For you.
So it did start off as a book. I started when my first kid took off. I started writing him letters, because I'm like, "Hey, I'm your dad. I still have to dad you." And he would burn them and send me pictures of them on fire. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to keep writing." And so I wrote in my Bible for a long time, besides my Bible, because I knew he wouldn't burn a Bible. And then I just kept going on every day. I would just write to him, and not just about explaining myself, but doing the dad things.
Yeah,
Hey,
what's
you
going on?
still need your dad. Here's advice, blah, blah. Ended up typing it up and typed, and then it was like 100,000 words. And by that point, all three had been gone. But I just took it and I sent it to the house and never heard back from him. So I went in and went, you know what, I'm going to help others, and I changed everybody's names for privacy and got it published.
Yes.
And
It's on Amazon.
yeah, I think some people have commented that it's been helpful, but I love it when I hear from people my age who go, it was helpful because I came out later.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So
What's the book called?
Yeah, what's the book?
Terms of Estrangement. So like the movie Terms of Endearment, but estrangement.
Estranged.
Estrangement.
It's estrangement.
Estrangement.
It's a
Got it.
strange word. Estrangement.
Well, this has been amazing. You guys really having this moment to be able to talk and share your stories and feeling safe to do that has been wonderful. We'd like to continue sharing stories and being able to talk to people today at our rally. We would love everyone to make sure that you attend 2:00 today. And we're going to be rallying with our signs, which we're going to share in a moment, right before we see the fabulous film Unfix. So, should we show?
Yeah, sure. We do have a comment.
Yes, no, I want to hear
Okay.
please.
Yes.
People are watching.
I forgot.
I have one too. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll make sure this will quickly
I do.
first because Michael Bessie, who was one of our guests in Palm Springs,
Yes.
and he
Yes.
writes. He said that Trevor, the homophobia that created conversion therapy can be cured. That's the actual disorder.
Oh,
Interesting.
that's wild.
Yeah, we've got some of our board members from the Conversion Therapy Dropout Network watching.
Great.
We've got Katie Jennifer. She's one of our board members. We love Katie. And she says, could the panel discuss the recent West Virginia bill that was introduced that would mandate conversion therapy for transgender youth, along with banning all gender-affirming health care for transgender youth, specifically the implications, possibility of copycat laws, and how to support folks in West Virginia, etc. I think there is a copycat law in Florida, which
Yes.
is what we were talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah. You want to?
Well, I think it's important for people to recognize that the opposite of conversion therapy is gender affirming care. Because gender affirming care
Thank
says,
you.
I believe who you are.
Yep.
Where do you want to go? What does this even mean to you?
Absolutely.
And it's therapy ethically practiced because you listen to the client rather than say, I know who you are and I know what's good for you.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense because part of my conversion therapy is they labeled me with gender dysphoria. They called me a trans woman because they thought, oh, well, clearly this effeminate gay guy must think he's a woman. Right? They don't understand what it really is, and they conflate so many parts of our community.
Yeah.
So when you have these copycat laws trying to say, no, you can't have gender-confirming care, sometimes it's even in states like Utah where they also ban conversion therapy. So it's like they have no idea that the very thing they're trying to ban is encouraging the other thing that they banned.
Yeah.
So it's just absolutely ridiculous that these people have no lived experience, let alone the logical capacity to realize what they're doing.
Beautifully said. Beautifully
I'm going to
said.
take some shit for this, but I don't care. Look, you can ban conversion therapy across the nation, and everybody like, yay, finally. A good percentage of the conversion therapy is going on within churches, and the government can absolutely not do anything to stop that. So even if a parent who wasn't religious, who if it was, oh, we can't do conversion therapy in here because it's illegal, I'll just take them to the local church, and they can get it in there.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, at the basis of what conversion therapy is, evangelicalism is, read the Bible and pray more. I mean, that's essentially it. And, of course, the whole, you must hate your dad because you're a boy. If you're a girl, you hate your mom. Let's go through that whole thing. So that's my big concern. When I hear states have made progress in making it illegal, I'm like, that's good, and I'm not trying to rain on everybody's parade. But it's a bigger fight than what we think it is.
Yeah,
I have to
absolutely.
agree with that. I work for a hospital system, and I was told by several of our therapists that parents still come to them and say, fix my child, because they think it's something that can be fixed, and we have to deny them. But you know where those parents are going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and in my state, it is completely banned for adults as well. So, right, the laws really aren't going to do much as long as there are people that think that we're born broken and there's nothing
Yes,
to fix.
yes.
Well, and that it's actually funny that we're having this today because today is the 8th anniversary of when I first testified to ban conversion therapy in Illinois.
Yes, earn it.
With that being said, you know, it is illegal in Illinois. It was the 3rd state to do so, following California. But the laws are inefficient. I mean, they're good. They're good. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it's not sufficient in what we need to be doing. I think actually Canada has gone much further than we have, and actually just saying you can't do this at all, no matter who you are. The problem that we have with these laws, and it all started with the Jonah case in New Jersey, is that there were exemptions made for anyone over the age of 18 and it was only for licensed professionals. So that's it.
Yeah.
But a vast majority of cases that we're seeing are not by licensed professionals, and we're also seeing like people over the age of 18.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's some major loopholes that we're trying to close, but as we all know in the US, when you start getting into stuff like that, people start screaming about religious exemptions, and then it just dies wherever it goes. Yeah. Exactly.
So do we talk about safe spaces, we talk about where people can go to talk, and we just keep the communication going, and we keep talking and pushing until, you know, it just by chance, somebody might walk across and see it, and we just keep doing that, and that's the best we can do at this minute while we keep pushing the laws.
Well, it shows that just one person being affirming can mean the difference between life or death.
Literally,
for someone.
yes,
And the same
absolutely.
excuses that they've used for gay men and lesbian women are now being used against trans people.
100%.
And obviously, people still don't support some of us, but those same arguments are being
Yeah.
used for the trans community.
100%.
A question came up from Abraham Chavez. What would you
That's my
tell?
husband.
What would you tell to parents or young adults today currently attending or being forced to attend conversion therapy?
What do we tell parents? I think you tell them, you know what? Nothing affects, and that's why I love this film too. Nothing changes life more than stories. We can sit there and give statistics, and we can do all of these things. And I talk about it, but I'm telling you, when I start telling people the dog shit story, everybody glues in.
Right.
Because it's a story, and it really happens. So,
Right.
what do you do to the parents? We tell them the stories.
Yeah.
We tell them your
Yes.
guys' story
Yes.
and our stories of what is happening. So there's a connection there because all humans love stories.
Yeah,
So I think that's a place to start. Certainly.
I agree.
So my grad school project was going to be on the why parents reject their queer children, and so I did research heavily what this is entailing, and I tend to read the stories of parents who send their kids to conversion therapy and reject them, is that they feel that their child's success is an impact on them personally, and they mourn grandchildren, or they have very strong religious beliefs, and the more gender non-conforming they are, the more rejecting they tend to be. But it seems like the research says that families do better when you start listening to your kids and recognize they're not your property, and that you need to heal your trauma and not force it onto your children, because you will lose them. You will absolutely lose your child if they even survive. And if you want to have your entire family grow and be more healthy like you would want, you need to take yourself to therapy, do your own work first, process your grief to the side, don't hurt your child. I know you're going to feel like you have a mourning of a child that you lost, but you never had that child. You just never knew who your child was. And this can be an opportunity to learn the beauty of the child that you have always had and never had the freedom to know.
All right, so shall we share our signs on that amazing note? All right.
Okay. I don't know which one was mine.
Am I sitting on yours?
How did you do the story?
No one doesn't have a sign, Grant.
They chose them for a reason.
I didn't get a
Okay.
sign.
Noah's
All right,
sign
so here's the deal.
You grab one for no until improvise.
Everyone pick their sign for a reason. I haven't chosen yet. Here's the deal.
Oh, no,
Here, I'll just hold on to
No.
all the titles.
no, what?
I need to give you something a little different.
Oh,
This is too
okay. Yeah,
easy.
I already stopped.
Too easy.
I like the simplicity.
I know. Pause. Do you mind if I get up really quick?
You got statistics.
Oh yeah,
Can you click OK?
on that top,
The top one.
top
yes.
one right there.
Oh no, it ended. Oh well.
Okay. It's okay. We can still go in here. And why are we chosen?
Why have we chosen? So let's start from one end. Why have we chosen this sign?
I
It
chose
says
it because I-
Unfix because you love this movie.
Yeah, because I just love the movie. As one of the actors, I love it so much. I just appreciated the artistry of the film too, not just the message. So that's why I chose this.
I chose this one because the trans community is under attack. And I think, unfortunately, even within the queer community, once we get our rights, we forget that until all of us have our rights, none of us are safe.
Mine says conversion therapy is still happening, because this is something I say all the time when we do different Pride events, specifically here in California, because a lot of people think, oh, it's outlawed, it's, it's gone away. The fact of the matter is it's not. Trevor Project actually just released a whole study on it and found there's almost 3,000 practitioners in the United States that they could find. And Southern California is actually the hub of most of the places that do conversion therapy, and then they export it across the world. Yep, Orange County, not just Orange County.
Yeah.
There's, in my day job, our corporate office, 2 blocks away, there's someone that does conversion therapy. We're in Beverly Hills. And Encino has got one of the most prolific. Joseph Nicolosi's son, Joseph Nicolosi Jr., is doing conversion therapy in Encino. So it's still happening. It's still happening in California. It's still happening in Illinois. It's happening everywhere. My conversion therapist is still practicing, even though he's not supposed to be, but I'm certain that he still is.
Making money.
This one.
And that's the thing that people will say, we can say it doesn't work, right? And for all intents and purposes, it doesn't. And we don't have very many people who have said it worked, right? You might have 1% of the people who went through it say, oh, it worked for me. But how do you know? You can't measure whether they're truly being honest. But I've never, ever seen somebody who went through it and said, it actually worked.
It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, and it turned me straight. I've never seen it.
So as we've heard, I'm sure you've heard that one of the number one causes for death for children is suicide. So just to understand the impact of conversion therapy, 28% of teen suicide were minors that were subjected to conversion therapy. So that is a huge portion of what these kids are going through, and those are just identified as. I bet there's probably a little more.
Yeah. So we chose this sign right here. 73,000 minors will fall victim to conversion therapy before the age of 18. And that's just understanding that your identity is such a malleable place when you're young, and having somebody tell you what you should be or how you should act at such a young age, it's just so easy to blindly follow that direction because you don't have a sense of self. Yeah.
Most kids want to please their parents or be the best kid or, show up fully, and it's like, well, if people that say they love me are telling me that I'm wrong, then I must be.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't know I needed to pick a sign, so I had one handed to me.
Good sign.
This is 70 anti-LGBTQ plus laws were enacted in 2023. And I guess that just goes to show that we have a systemic issue here, and they like to hide behind the veil of it's a free country and you can do whatever you want, but we have people who have no right to do their things they're doing, trying to control lives that maybe make them feel uncomfortable. And I think that's bullshit, so.
We really need to emphasize voting.
Voting, yeah.
Local
vote,
levels.
everybody
Understand
vote,
who
vote,
all
yeah.
of your local
Local
level,
voting, yes.
local
Yes.
voting,
Very, very
judges.
important.
Those folks are the really important.
It's the best we can do,
Yeah.
so. Absolutely.
Mine just says stop conversion.
Yeah.
Right to the point.
That works.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We're starting it out. So yeah.
Yay.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing everybody at the rally.
Let's
We'll all
go.
be there, and to see everybody at Unfix today at 4:45. Thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
I don't know how to stop applause.
It's like,
Just hide.
yeah.